Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, brought to you by Techstrong and Tricentis. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning. We have an exciting panel ahead, but first I have just a couple of housekeeping notes. First off, today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion or you'd like to just rewatch or share with a friend, the recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live webinar. You should also receive an email with a link to access that recording. If you have any questions, we want you to direct those to the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen. And that's also where you're going to find the chat tab, where we want you to engage with your fellow audience members and help influence our discussion today. Finally, at the conclusion of our webinar, we will be giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around. So on to our roundtable today. We'll be discussing building a high-performing DevOps team. And I'm joined today by an expert panel who will give you each their own introductions. But to kick off our discussion, I will let Alan Schimmel, founder and CEO of Techstrong Group, take it away. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Cody. Thanks for warming up. Good day, everyone, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening. Thanks for joining us. This is a special edition of our DevOps Unbound series. For those of you who may be familiar, DevOps Unbound is a bi-weekly video series where my co-host Mitchell Ashley and I assemble, fantastic all-star panels of experts to discuss various topics around DevOps, related to DevOps. We've been doing it now, well over a year. We are joined in this endeavor by our friends at Tricentis, who have gratefully sponsored DevOps Unbound and have so since the beginning. And many thanks to Tricentis for sponsoring. Once a month or thereabouts, we do a special edition of DevOps Unbound, where we expand our panel to include you, our audience at home. And we call it a live roundtable versus a regular DevOps Unbound session. These live roundtables, when they work right, are fantastic. And the reason they are, again, is because of you. What we have found are these roundtables are only as good as our audience makes them, because we count on you to help drive the conversation. We count on you to steer our discussion. Don't be afraid to ask our panel the hard questions that you're thinking about. Don't be afraid to comment, right, on what your thoughts on topics that we're discussing are. You could do it in a couple of different places here in our big marker webinar system. For most of you, there's a right hand on the right side of your browser is a communications panel. And in that communications panel, you'll find there's 3 or 4 different headings. The ones I want to focus you on today are marked chat and QA. Under the chat heading, there is the public chat. And that is just what it purports to be, a public chat. You put something on there, every single person logged onto this webinar, whether they are on the panel or just in the audience, sees what you wrote. And that could be a good thing or maybe not, but be aware that if you put it in there, everyone is going to see it. I always like to get things kicked off by saying, hey, I'm coming at you today from Boca Raton, Florida. We'd love to see where you are in the world and where you're logging in from. So feel free to jump in and say hi from wherever you are. Then there's the Q&A section of our communications panel. The Q&A section is if you have a specific comment or question for the panel at large or a particular member on the panel, put it in there. We will try to get to it. Mitchell is going to be manning the Q&A channel today, so he'll get it out to the team. Also, you do have the ability to use the private chat in the main chat section. And that is if someone asks a question, you want to engage with them one-on-one, not in a public forum, you can do so. The only thing is I'll caution you is, look, this isn't Leisure Larry or anything like that. And it's not a place for you, to be trolling. It's if there's a real conversation, and don't feel obligated to answer someone if they do reach out to you privately. That's consenting adults and all that stuff. I prefer the public chat and the Q&A. That being said, let's move on now to our panel and our topic today. As Cody mentioned, we are going to be discussing high-performing DevOps teams. How do you develop one? How do you maintain one? How do you join one even, maybe? I'm lucky enough to have several people here who have actually been or have helped build high-performing DevOps teams in their careers. And I think it's going to be a great conversation. Let me introduce you, excuse me, let me introduce you to our panel now on this. First joining us is Ms. Sharon Alvarez. And Sharon, welcome. Welcome back to DevOps Unbound. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hey, thank you very much, Alan. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here to answer your questions. Sharon, I'm based in Seattle. I've been in the Agile and DevOps space for probably 10, 13 years. I started off in France in lean manufacturing, and I've been instrumental in leading really large-scale Agile adoption and transformations and working with DevOps teams and setting up DevOps Dojos. I'm very excited to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to all your questions.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks for joining us. Next, I want to introduce you to, I was going to say an old friend, but he's really not old. He's just been a friend for a long time with me. His name's Brian Dawson. Brian has a stellar resume in the DevOps space, Agile. And Brian, it's great to see you well and on my screen today. Welcome back.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Yes, I got to experience a bit of the COVID-19, and you're so kind, but I am old. So I've spent about and it's a joy to be on here with this panel. I currently work for a company called Ripple. A company in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space, and I oversee our partnerships there. I joined with about 30 years in software development and delivery, and I take pride in saying I have a panoramic view. I've worked as an individual contributor or leader in practically every phase of software development and delivery. So while I'm not as deeply credentialed as many here, I think I have a perspective. I like to describe myself as a technologist that focuses on working with humans to develop and deliver better software for humans. Glad to be here with y'all today.
Thanks, Brian. Glad you can join us. Next up, let me introduce you to one of my favorite people. Her name is Raven Manuel. She's a fellow New Yorker like me. She's a Bronx gal. I was Queens, but both of us are out of New York now. Hey, Raven, it's a pleasure to see you again. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Miss you very much. Virtual hugs, Alan. Thank you. And I won't tell anybody from Queens. We'll forgive you.
Yeah, I don't tell them usually, but yeah.
I am Raven Manuel, as Alan said. I am the senior application developer, kind of architect, and the DevOps engineer for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is a unit under the Smithsonian Institution. My favorite part of my job is actually building the very small interactives that you kind of play with when you're in the gallery space. But I also make policy and develop processes and strategy for DevOps for our unit. And I'm the AWS administrator for our cloud resources. But as I was telling the panel before we got started, I have the best job ever. I do work a little bit, but I kind of do a lot of R&D, and R&D is like a very cognitive type of job. So I just think a lot.
Nothing the matter with that.
No.
And you know what? Good thinkers are hard to come by. Thanks, Raven. All right. Our fourth panel member is Adam. And Adam, I don't have my, as I mentioned, my computer is really not in front of me here. But it's Adam Satterfield, correct?
You got it.
Cool. Adam, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hey, really excited to be here. I know I recognize a couple of faces, and it's actually a pleasure to speak alongside you. Yeah, so I've been in the industry about 2 decades or so. Right now, my specialty is really helping, legacy teams learn how to adopt DevOps best practices inside of the cloud and help them migrate over and figure out how to configure pipelines and really kind of understand what it means to have a true CI/CD cycle.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us, Adam, and welcome to the panel. Our last panel member, I've already referenced him a few times, is my co-host of DevOps Unbound. He's also a longtime business partner and colleague of mine. He's a little older than me, I'll mention, by 3 months. My friend Mitchell Ashley. Mitchell, go ahead.
I'm just going to have you call me your favorite CTO, but anyway, that's a whole other.
That'll go.
So,
that's assuming, but go ahead.
Well, I put it out there now, so it's
Okay.
stuck. So Mitch Ashley, and I am CTO with Techstrong Group, and as Alan mentioned, been business partners off and on over several years. I'm also principal of our analyst business, helping start that a few years back, and we cover DevOps and cybersecurity and cloud native AI, ML data, kind of things that we need to do to modern applications today. So let's get right to it. I want to hear from these folks. I love this panel. They're all great folks. So thank you to our team for putting this panel together.
Fantastic. Mitchell, you're manning the chat, so feel free to interject with questions from the audience. But as Mitch says, let's jump in. So the topic today is high-performing DevOps teams. Look, for myself, like for many of you out there, the first time you may have heard that term, high-performing DevOps teams, was in the DORA reports, right? Kind of the seminal work that Dr. Nicole Forsgren and Jez Humble, along with Gene Kim, did as part of DORA in their DevOps survey, which I should mention was, originally started off by our friends at Puppet in their annual DevOps survey, and then the DORA folks, started helping out Puppet and eventually kind of took that on their own. Puppet still does their DevOps survey. But that whole concept that high-performing teams result in tangible positives and tangible pluses was really borne out in their research, right? I think up to that point, a lot of people in their gut felt that DevOps could lead to better results, more profitability, whatever metric you want to use to measure better, right? But it wasn't until we started seeing it in the DORA stuff that I think people began to really kind of focus in on that. Look, all 4 of you folks on here have been around decades, right? We're all familiar with what the DORA work is, but is that sort of the benchmark for high-performing DevOps teams? Or what does high-performing teams mean to you? I'll ask anyone who wants to jump in on that.
First, I agree. I think the DORA report did a great job of quantifying what the benefit and kind of target outcome of DevOps is. When we talk about some of the sort of key metrics, KPIs, right? Those are now just kind of woven into the lexicon of DevOps discussion in terms of mean time to recovery, cycle time, etc. I would say that those metrics give us a good foundation to kind of align around. But in my opinion, a high-performing DevOps team is less about velocity, less about measuring time, and really more about ensuring that you have a team that can consistently deliver. They can deliver with quality, capabilities, and they deliver positive customer experience, whether you're front end, back end, irrespective of who your customer is. So I'd say continuous, consistent, quality, capabilities, and customer experience.
A lot of C's there.
Yeah, definitely agree with Brian there. And one of the things that we always try to shoot for with high-performing teams is we like to say autonomy with security, right? Is our big goal with, the DevOps teams is trying to remove that click ops where a developer tries to promote code to a certain environment by, running through some manual steps. And when we have those high performing teams, what you can do is you can reduce the errors, reduce the problems that might occur with that. And, with autonomy, teams naturally will develop things faster. They naturally will, be more high performing because they understand, if I run this script, I know that it's been tested. I know that it works. And it's something that my DevOps team has helped me with, whether you're going through, Jenkins, whether you're using something like a Terraform or Ansible, right? It kind of gives you that control to where now a DevOps team can go and they can develop it in a lot more secure manner without having to go ask the infrastructure team to do something or having to go, through a lengthy change management process.
I think
Agreed.
that, oh, sorry, Alan, go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Raven.
I was going to say, my first introduction to high performance teams was in, I was going for my EMBA, and that was one of the terms that we had to understand. And so for me, the DevOps part of high performance team is just the extra. The high performance is actually the thing because I think, Brian, you said it before, it's about people. And so you have, in order to be performant and high performant, that means you have to be collaborative, you have to engage together, interactive, respect the space and respect the differences, and then be able to, as a team, go from A to B and get there in time under budget. So for the DevOps part, I agree with you, Adam. All of that is part of a high performance DevOps team, but it's the high performance focus because it's a person focused and it doesn't really matter what you're doing. You have to work with each other.
Good point. Let me jump in on something. Mitchell and I, when we started Still Secure, had our friend Raj, a co-founded company, who founded the company with us. Raj always had a saying that everything could be measured and we measure everything. I think we have, Raven, and especially Brian and Adam, you've hit the right things. A lot of C's, as I mentioned, right? You've hit the right things we need to point to ascertain or to show, what high performing teams are doing well. Of course, the question is, how do we measure that they're doing well, right? What are the metrics that matter? How do we, because, it's easy to say, kumbaya, and this was a problem when I first launched DevOps.com. A lot of people thought all that cultural stuff was kumbaya stuff, and there were no subjective measurements that would show high-performing teams result in better outcomes for companies, right? Yeah, the team gets together. Yeah, it's all kumbaya. Yeah. But how do we measure it? And so I'm interested, Sharon. Your background, you have a lot of Agile, and Agile was a little different because we could point to, well, how much code did you release? How long did it take you to release that code? What were the bugs that were found? How much had to be, redone or what have you? There are very specific metrics when we talk about software release per se, right? That we can measure high performance. And some of those lend themselves to DevOps, but DevOps has this whole other aspect to it as well. Interested in your thoughts there.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. And I very much agree with what you all mentioned, by the way. And also in the chat, I saw some great comments around the business engagement, how a high performance team is one that's going to be engaged with the business, right? And what you mentioned, Alan, around measuring high performance team. So I think when we talk about DevOps in particular, we can focus on the DORA metrics and the technology and especially automation. We can focus on all of that. And I do believe it's a huge part of helping teams become high performing, and they want to develop a high velocity. And I use the term velocity not in reference to StoryPoint, but more in reference to what McKinsey and Microsoft have introduced, the Developer Velocity Index. So I do believe that automation and the technology is super important, but there's also everything that you talked about and what our participants have been talking about, right? So psychological safety the research that McKinsey and Microsoft did and the research that Google did have proven that psychological safety is the criteria number one of innovation and high performance teams. So, and it's very difficult to understand, still very difficult to introduce. I'm introducing a lot of that right now in my company at Salesforce with my executives and teams. But I can tell you it's really difficult to introduce, difficult to even talk about and measure. And then there's all of the other things you all talked about, the culture, the collaboration, inclusive collaboration, building that environment where they're going to thrive, and their relationship with the business. So I love that in the comment. I'm going back to Randy Schaub. Actually, he did a talk where he made some really good point. He mentioned the fact that those technical metrics are really important, but it's important to give our developers, DevOps, engineers, metrics that's going to help them relate to the business. So more business-driven metrics. And that generally drives their engagement. Developers thrive when they see that their work is consumed by the business. They thrive when they have that relationship with the business. And that contributes to developing high performance teams. So those
Agreed.
Yeah.
Let me bring in someone from the audience, right? So one of the participants in our audience, because we're trying not to use names, is, it makes the comment that Dora is great for management, in my opinion. Now, the flip side of that is, okay, if it's great for management, does that mean it's not great for the individual workers or the teams? Is it management only? Why is it great for only management, right? Or are we trying to say that high performance is something that management cares about only? I don't buy that. I think Sharon's dead on.
Or are they
Developers
vanity
want to know.
metrics? Sometimes management metrics are vanity metrics, right?
Yeah, sometimes, right? To make themselves look good. I mean, Brian, I know in your life you've been on both sides of that, management and contributor.
Yeah.
Is Dora is the whole high performing thing just something that management worries about?
Well, yeah, I mean, so this is an interesting one. So first of all, I'd say, as I maybe indicated earlier, I truly strongly believe that Dora gives us a key baseline of technical and adjacent metrics, right? And oftentimes when management doesn't understand the software organization, they don't know how to kind of say, are they doing well or not? It gives some tangible metrics that say, in terms of a baseline, here's how we're delivering. However, I'd say that you cannot stand, when connecting dev and the business, DevOps and the business, you cannot stand on these technical metrics alone. Because what you don't get through MTTR, what you don't get through cycle time is how are we influencing key business objectives? And maybe our business objective is the market seeing a shift. We need to be able to rapidly innovate. Can you measure that just by saying we're delivering, X number of features to production a week? You can't. And so while I think it's a good starting point to start to provide some transparency to leadership, to start to engage in a discussion, I'll hark back to something Sharon said. Look, developers need more than just to be said, fix problems this fast, remediate this fast. We're technical creatives. We need to understand context. We need to understand how we're bringing our experience and our team to bear to solve higher order problems. And to do that, it's important you have a deeper dialogue between leadership and the team than just a set of quantitative cycle metrics.
Yeah, Brian, if I can build on your point as well, one of the things that we oftentimes forget when we go for metrics is the why, right?
Yeah.
Why are we using these metrics? Are we trying to solve a problem? Are we trying to just highlight the work that the team is doing? And I see when metrics like these fail with the leader, it's because we just decide to measure and we don't explain the story behind it. We don't explain what we're trying to get or even what the expectation is for the leader. So we should expect something in return when we're measuring these, and presenting these to leadership of what do we want from you, right? We just want to highlight what the team is doing. Look at the great work they're doing. Okay, we don't need anything else from you, right? Or we have a problem and we've measured it and we need some sort of solution to fix that problem. So definitely for teams, if you're looking to implement metrics, don't forget your story and don't forget your why.
Let me interject a little different take on this, and because I think we're all sort of aligning around metrics, and they are a good thing. There's also a downside to metrics. Metrics can be very inwardly focused. They can be focused on the wrong things. I think is one of the reasons why we asked about Dora. Those good things to focus. My thinking on this has evolved from metrics are the secondary thing. The primary thing are what are the outcomes we want to have happen. What is it? Is it velocity for the business? Is it flexibility to be able to do experimentation and market? Is it getting products out faster? Is it having an influence beyond the team? It's not just a team of high performers, but it's a high performance team that's having an effect on the rest of the organization. And what are those things we want it to be? So some of them might fall into a little bit of a softer camp. Maybe they're not totally measurable, but I think that's what defined our metrics. So I wouldn't rush just to go, let's align with Dora and we're good, because then management.
But it's not metrics for metrics' sake.
Yeah, exactly.
Raven, you wanted to say something? Good.
Oh yeah, because I have an opinion about
Surprise.
this. One of the reasons why I really like being on panels in general is because small agencies get forgotten in the whole conversation. And the whole point of Agile, the methodology, and DevOps, this philosophy or back and forth, is the flexibility that it offers. It's not prescriptive. You don't have to do all of the Agile stuff, and you don't have to do all of the DevOps stuff, right? So if you have all of these public and private sectors that are doing DevOps and Agile that works for them, they don't meet the metrics, right? Your metrics don't even apply. So the metrics are not evenly applied. They cannot be, you cannot say, I'm better than this particular organization, because it's apples to like pineapples, right? It's not even the same. You get to choose, and anyone that's thinking out there about measuring the performance and the continuous the continuous improvement of your teams, that's what you need to be measuring if you want to, because the whole point of DevOps is to get better, is to experience incremental change. And Alan, I think you said it, you have to know what or maybe it's Brian, Mitch, I don't know. I was just excited.
I'll take credit.
Okay.
I'll take credit.
Yes, you just need to know what it is that you're looking for. And if you're asking yourself that, and you're already in the middle of DevOps, then you probably shouldn't even be doing DevOps, because that was a question you should have been asking when you were implementing and planning for DevOps. I'm getting off my soapbox because I could do this all day.
Okay. Hey, we've got a question in the Q&A, and I thank one of our attendees for putting it in there. It says teams should aspire to do well in Dora, but how do they do that, right? And it's a human nature thing. Everyone wants to win. Everyone wants to be successful. It's not like that commercial. Remember that commercial was out a few years ago? I want to have to retire early because I'm made obsolete. No one really wants that. We all want to, right, succeed and be successful. So, but how getting there is the issue, right? How do we? All right, so we did a Dora survey, and you know what? We're not killing it. We got to get better, right? How do I plot my roadmap, if you will, to getting better, to becoming a high performing team, right? Unfortunately, for a lot of folks out here, they're not part of high performing teams today. Sharon, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind kicking it off. Maybe Adam has some thoughts. How do you get on track here?
Yeah, it's great. I love it that we're taking a step back. So first we have to be deliberate about it. It just doesn't happen. And I like what you said, Raven. It's and Adam as well. This is going back to the why. And then we have to look at our objectives, and also looking at being mindful of the barriers, the organizational barriers. You talked about roadmap, Alan. So we need to look at all of the organizational barriers that we have when we're trying to develop high performing, not develop, but when we're trying to mature teams and we're trying to help them get better. Sometimes I'm not a huge fan of high performing team, because it's putting a lot of pressure on the teams to be high performing, and it's a consulting type of word that we use in order to sell to organization. And so I think we have to start with the teams where they are. That's why I like what you said, Raven, the context. And I'm not talking about doing an assessment, but looking at our organization. What are the barriers? What education do we need to do with our executives? So the McKinsey and Microsoft study, and I'm referencing it a lot, I'll share it with you. It's very interesting because they showed that executives don't understand the relationship between best-in-class tools and developer velocity. So they don't understand that. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen at the executive level. Then we also need to look at all of the cultural aspect of the organization. So the silos. We're talking a lot about the business and DevOps. And if we talk a lot about that, it's because obviously we still see silos, right? We still see not only thinking silos, but also organizational silos. So we have to look at it. So for me, high performing team is not just the technology and DORA. It's a sort of index composed of different, attributes, cultural, organizational, upskilling. We haven't talked about upskilling our engineers, right? This is a huge part of their engagement and their ability to deliver quickly. And then some of you talked about metrics, what we should look at, and measuring. So there's the health of the team. Instead of looking at metrics, it's more looking at health indicators. And also not just looking at the flow. So metrics that are more aligned with business, so expectations such as the flow, such as throughput, these kind of things. Yeah.
Yep. Hey, I got a few more questions from the audience. I love this. This is the kind of give and take we need. So another participant wants to know, how do we measure delivery of business value and building the right thing at the right time? This isn't something DORA measures.
Right.
Like DORA isn't the be
Right.
all and end all. There's other I think aspects to a high performing team, and this is something that I think is important. Sharon, I know you +1 that one. How do we do that? Adam, any ideas? Anybody, any ideas?
Sharon?
Yep.
Oh, go ahead. I talked to you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so I mentioned in my response that it's really hard to understand the value that is being delivered without the voice of the customer, and I truly think that in the overall cooperation, DevOps really being about people. Oftentimes, especially in large enterprises, that is a big piece missing. You have developers working, testers working, and ultimately something's delivered and it kind of goes into a black box, and they really never understand, are the customers actually happy with what we've delivered and what we've built?
Right.
And I really think that that's something as a business leader, as an executive leader, to have that regular communication, to have that regular conversation, because if we're building something super fast and it's super neat and it's using the latest tools, but everyone hates it, it's not really effective, and it's not really what we should be building.
Yeah, and I'd add, translating business value into a metric that the software, that dev and delivery or DevOps can use is very business specific. So I don't think there's a one size fits all answer. But a couple of things, as we referenced earlier, it's important to have a bi-directional dialogue and a common understanding with the business. I do think that process of sort of saying, okay, where are we? Where do we want to be? i.e. connect with the business and understand what our goals as a company are and how our software services those goals, and then saying, how do we get there, is a discussion that may not immediately bear all the answers, but it'll set the foundation for a fruitful collaboration between software dev and the business. Now, Adam, I think I'd add, look, absent any other metric, and that doesn't necessarily apply for all other software, at the end of the day, most businesses are using software and technology to service customers, to provide a better experience. in one way or another. You may be a few orders removed. It may be the back end ordering system that agents use to deliver better person-to-person experience, right? So absence any other metric, I do believe a component of business value should be measured in customer satisfaction, customer retention, quality of customer engagement. Yep. And if we start there, we're in a good place.
I have a question for Adam. For something, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Awesome. So Adam, I was curious and interested because when you were talking about DevOps, and then you mentioned not having quality, whatever, and not knowing what the customer means. For me, DevOps is an outcome of the Agile methodology, and Agile is actually made, that's what it's for, to be engaging, to have those feedback loops so that by the end, you do have what the customer wants. So what was your thought when you actually said that?
Yeah, and it's a great point, and I totally agree. And I think some of this comes from, maybe the unfortunate influences the large enterprises have had on my psyche. And so, I used to work for a very large healthcare, company, go unnamed. I work for a financial technology company that goes unnamed, but if you look at my LinkedIn profile, you'll probably find it. And there's not a lot of teams that truly follow true Agile. We have a lot of teams that may do Agile potentially on their planning, but it's very waterfall in their delivery. And there's a multitude of reasons for that. This obviously isn't a full Agile chat, but I think one of the things that we've had to realize is from a DevOps standpoint is how do we help those teams, right? How do we kind of work with those teams and make sure that whether you're Agile, Waterfall, Agile Fall or whatever, that we can help provide for those teams. We've kind of come up with a shared services model where we have DevOps that kind of pop around from team to team. So, our team doesn't necessarily see the end results, right? We kind of potentially hear from some of the developers, but, and that may not even be like a true DevOps model, right? Based on what some teams are doing. But I think, one of the things that I truly like in the overall DevOps philosophy is, flexibility of mind, right? Yeah. How can you kind of like change the way that you're doing something to serve, your customer, which my customer is the development team.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Hey, we've got another question. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, I just want to start some trouble because something came up here. I mean, we're talking about what we said, building high-performing DevOps teams. What's a DevOps team? Or are we all talking about the same thing when we talk about what a DevOps team is?
There you go. Starting trouble.
You can push right past that, Adam. I think
I'm not pushing. There's been a question since I started DevOps.com. Is there such a thing as a DevOps engineer? Do we have a DevOps team? So what is a DevOps team anyway?
I get paid to be a DevOps engineer. Don't say that.
Hey, if it works for you, Raven, it works, right? I mean, but back in 2013, we've evolved since then, right?
Yeah.
I hope we have. But what is a DevOps team?
And that's why I mentioned a product engineering team. I really prefer calling them, and that's why I rather call any DevOps dojo or call it a product engineering. And the reason for that is, DevOps sometimes makes the business feel that they are excluded with what's going on with DevOps, right? It's so engineering driven. But I think it's not the case. DevOps never meant to be exclusive of the business and, obsessed on it was never the case actually when the movement started. On the contrary, and John Willis said in 2010, actually, it's a really long time ago, he said, it's published, all attempt of automation are going to be fruitless if you don't have the culture to support your DevOps culture, right? Your DevOps initiative. And that was in 2010. I think that we're still missing the mark today. And I think it's because we have so much, I think DevOps is a really cool industry with a lot of great things happening at a really fast pace, lots of technology investments. And so it's going a lot faster like you said, Adam, it's going a lot faster than Agile. And I remember I mentioned at a conference, and I made a lot of enemies. We need to automate. We need to automate Agile, not agility, but Agile. We're focusing on a lot of things about Agile that are not relevant, and several studies have mentioned that. I saw some question around planning, the Scrum ceremonies. They're not as important as focusing on empiricism, inspect, adapt, and the flexibility that we need to help the teams. So I'm really big about, some people call it biz DevOps or product engineering. And it's not because DevOps excluded the business, not at all. It's just the perception that we have today.
Yeah, and one of the things. Oh, sorry, Alan. Go ahead.
No, Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've come to realize, with some of the larger enterprises, is that there's a lot of people, especially leaders, and hopefully none of my leaders are watching this, that don't know anything about DevOps. So oftentimes we have to be educators, right? So a lot of us, we're obviously in this webinar, we go to talks, we speak at conferences, we read books. We're kind of the anomaly in the technology world, right? Because we are fully ingrained into this, and I think sometimes we can get a little focused thinking that other people kind of know a lot about DevOps as well. And I've found that has gotten me into trouble a couple of times when I have a conversation and a leader stops me and goes, no, what is a pipeline? Right. And just kind of realizing that a lot of times the things that we're talking about may not be understood by leaders. So I think, from our standpoint, I look at DevOps as having to be an educator on what it means to actually, deliver software.
Absolutely. You know what? We've got a bunch of questions in the Q&A, and if we hit each one individually, we're never going to have time. I'm going to take a lot of them together, and in my mind, they all deal with a similar issue, which is what exactly, what's the makeup of a DevOps team, right? Is diversity important in a DevOps team? And when we talk about diversity, it's not just diversity of men versus women versus people of color versus Caucasians. It's diversity of roles. It's a diversity of training, of experiences, and everything else. In my mind, you can never have enough diversity, right? But hey, I got a panel of experts here. What do you think about that?
Can I step in on this one? And
Go.
lead this one?
Lead it.
Our DevOps team is ethereal. It actually is not a team. We have a name that people can work under. And so if we need something from security, then that security manager is now part of the team. So the team isn't actually another silo. It's not another silo. It includes all of the technologists and all the people that have to actually support the development and the delivery of a product, which includes the stakeholders who are determining the requirements. So if we need to have requirements so we know what the infrastructure is, then that particular curator for our stakeholders, they actually become part of the DevOps team because it's development and operations. So we are ethereal. It's really just me being a placeholder, holding that space for all of the people that I have to work with, even OCIO, which is not even in our organization, right? Just bringing them in when they're necessary. And I agree with Sharon, the business kind of feels like it's outside that bubble, but it shouldn't, because without them, we wouldn't have directive, right? There would be no directive. So the organization, that's why everybody says culture, but that is actually how the DevOps team works in our organization.
Fair enough.
I think that's a good
Other
example
thoughts?
too, we're engineers and we think about things and putting definitions and boundaries and measurements, and that's good to do too. There's also a kind of magic side to this. When I've been fortunate to either build or be on high performance teams, there is just a magic that happens. It's more than just a team of rock stars, individual rock stars, and it's more than kind of the synergy of 1 + 1 is 3. It's things happen, things gel, communication flows easily, flow happens easily. The influence that people have on each other, the communications, we talk about psychological safety and some of the questions and things like that. There are a lot of soft things that happen in high performance teams. And sometimes, to your point, Raven, I love we don't define it. You want to be on the team, you're on the team. Make yourself part of the team. and join it. You don't like it, go. It's not a problem. You're not required to be on it. But there is a let it be what it's going to be part of this. I don't mean to be too metaphysical about it, but whenever we constrain things, I always think, you know what, we're missing some things here by putting too much structure around it.
Fair.
There's your metaphysical thought for the day.
Yeah, agree 100%, Mitch. Sometimes as engineers or people sort of with logically oriented minds, we want to define, we want to apply engineering solutions to qualitative people problems, right? So agree fully.
Never works well. Just one quick thing on diversity, and then we can hop on to the dozens of other topics that people are throwing up here. Is when we talk about diversity, another area of diversity is in today's world, we have like kind of, you want to call them full stack developers, full stack engineers versus low coders and no coders and those kinds of things. And there's the testers, right? Tricentis, shout out to our sponsors. They cater to a professional tester. And many times they also cater to developers. They cater to the occasional tester, the open source, the automation, right? There's so many different within these DevOps teams when we look at skill sets and competencies, right? That's another area of diversity that I think we don't give it its due, right? And that comes in all shapes and sizes as well. Brian doesn't like the term full stack.
I'm just a grumpy. I told you I'm old. I don't like it.
Well, like Raven says, she gets paid for being a DevOps engineer. I know I'm signing a lot of paychecks every 2 weeks for my full stack developers or full stack engineers.
We'll talk about that.
So, hey, man, if I don't have to pay them, that's good by me. But
what's wrong with the term, Brian? What's wrong with the term? How would you determine that?
Well, I think it gives kind of a false perception or kind of discounts too much the value of domain expertise, especially when we're looking to deliver in pursuit of quality. So I often run into younger developers that are like, yeah, I'm a full stack developer. And when we dig a little further, what they really mean is they've developed an understanding of the vertical stack that they work with, but they don't necessarily own or understand end-to-end delivery. So I think, full stack sort of initially came about and leaned into this concept of somebody that owns delivery from concept to deploy. And there are years of expertise built around security that I don't expect a full stack to developer to hold, or network topology or network performance. So Raven, that's sort of it. I think oftentimes it's meant to project that I can own delivery from start to finish, and that's not what we should be striving for.
Well, I could be wrong. I think full stack was an evolution out of the old lamp stack days, right? You used to kind of refer to it like that.
Maybe
it's sort of back in front end, that whole mental.
Yeah, I kind of, sorry, Adam.
No,
Alan,
you go, Ray.
Okay.
Raven, go.
I think, Brian, that because I call myself full stack.
Oh, apologies.
That's okay. I love it. I love being insulted. It's awesome. Just makes me
this is
passionate.
how we build trust.
Exactly.
It's really a roast of
think
you,
that-
Raven, by the way. So.
It is. I think I understand your aggrievement. I just think that just because the label has been misused, that the label is actually still valid. For instance, and nobody hate me for this because I don't really follow football. My favorite teams are actually based off of color and how well the team looks in their uniforms. That's why one of my favorite teams is the Vikings, right? I just like the way they look. And Louisiana with the fleur-de-lis, because I like the fleur-de-lis, right? So, but can I call
Some of
myself?
us call it New Orleans. It's okay.
Yeah. Oh, is that how that's how it's referenced?
Yeah, they're the Saints.
No, but it's the same. It's the same. What you said, Alan. That doesn't make me a football fan, right? I can call myself a fan, but I don't watch any games or anything. And people talk. I don't do any footballish type of stuff. I just like, oh yeah, they've got a cool uniform. Their uniform bites, right? So full stack is just a label. And it actually, Mitch, you're right. It's about the tech stack, and it's about the your skill set and how far in the application you can develop. So we should take back the term full stack and revoke the licenses of those people who say that they're full stack anything.
Well, but this is always what happens in tech with hype stuff, right? Everybody wants to have a piece of the hot thing. And so, and it goes back to the Microsoft thing, right? DOS ain't done till Lotus don't run. We that's how old I am.
What?
But no, because we're just gonna keep watering it down and customizing it and extending it and all of that until it doesn't look anything like it was anymore. And it's a tough thing. I got one more. We're really in overtime already. So if you're joining us in overtime, great. Another participant came up with not a question, but a statement that, hey, DevOps departments end up becoming support silos in their experience. Shifting left, building the discipline and the engineering mindset is key. But is that the ultimate kind of destination for DevOps teams and departments, becoming support, transitioning to SRE? Or can you maintain that cross-functional team? Or maybe we just need a different name, as Sharon says, right? Product engineering. Was that what you called it, Sharon? Product engineering team, or?
Yeah, yes, product engineering. But just to clarify, DevOps is not a bad word. I certainly don't mean to say anything like that. I'm a huge fan of the movement. I just think that it's still misunderstood, and there's a lot of education, a lot of training to do around DevOps. I'm a huge fan of DevOps, and I try to to support it the best I can in my organization and in the community. But when I do so, I try to ensure that we see the balance. We see that it's not just the application, the platform, the tooling, even though there's a huge emphasis on it. It's all of the other things that we talked about. So it's certainly not a bad word. So product engineering team seems just more holistic because of everything we talked about. They don't focus on delivering DevOps product. They focus on delivering business products. And so it's just better suited, I think. The way I look at, I also, we talked about it on Monday during another Unbound episode, by the way, that I highly encourage you to watch about DevOps Dojos. Another way of calling them, I call them value stream dojos, and I don't want to call them value stream teams, but I have to say that I work across value streams right now, 2 clouds that are 2 value streams, and I encourage the teams to think of themselves as part of a value stream rather than as part of supporting a technology, which is DevOps.
It doesn't help that there's a DevSecOps. That doesn't help anything right there by including that particular label on anything.
Right.
Okay. Argue with some of my security friends about that.
I'm on my way down.
We'll be at RSA for DevSecOps days again. And Raven, you are welcome, my friend.
That's the opening keynote at RSA.
There you go.
Exactly. Well, no, you know what? I've said this before. There is only one DevOps. You do DevOps. I feel a lot of times we put sec in there because security people are snowflakes a little bit.
Our leaders,
and I'm a security person, right? It makes us feel important. But in any event, guys, we're out of time. I gotta wrap this up and wind it down. First of all, I want to thank most of all our audience, because we have barely scratched the surface of some of these comments and questions in here. I just couldn't handle them all. I grabbed my computer back so I could do it, and I couldn't. I mean, we did the best we could. If we didn't get to you, I apologize. Also, I had a little malfunction, I think, with my big marker. So, Cody, if you gave me those 4 winners for our Amazon cards, I haven't seen them. So if you want to come on at the end and you can announce the Amazon winners. Second to last, I want to thank Sharon, Raven, Brian, Adam. Guys, what a great panel. We could have done this for days and just kept going. Thank you so much for coming on here. Thank you to Mitchell, as always, co-hosting and riding shotgun with me here. It's a lot of fun. And then lastly, thank you so much to Tricentis for sponsoring these DevOps Unbound events. They are great. I have a great time with them. For those who are interested, I think we have it in the sticky section. Tricentis Virtual Summit, a half-day conference is coming up. It's free. You can click on there to register. Mitchell and I think, are doing a session there. And we will have a new version, a normal, not live roundtable version of DevOps Unbound in about a week and a half. And we'll be back next month with another live roundtable. But until then, let me turn this back over to Cody J. Brown, our face of webinars at Techstrong Learning. And he'll tell us about who won our Amazon cards today. Cody, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alan. So our the 4 winners of our $25 Amazon gift card drawing. Our first winner is Trevor B. Our second winner is Ashok P. Our third winner is Sheila G. And our fourth and final winner is Sean B. So to the 4 of you, please keep an eye on your inbox to claim your gift card. But if you don't see an email, just check your spam folder. I would like to, before we officially close out, just ask our audience to spend one more moment with us to fill out our post-webinar survey. But other than that, we hope to see you at a future upcoming Techstrong Learning webinar.
Okay. Thanks, Cody. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. Awesome.
Bye-bye.